Welcome everyone, this is Jed Shlackman. For this video, I'll be speaking about some personal growth and self-actualization subjects. We'll be focusing in on exploring our fears and our desires, and also we'll be seeking to understand how those fears and desires relate to the different aspects or levels or layers, you could say, of one's being. We're kind of multi-dimensional beings. There are different aspects to who we are. And those different aspects can have different desires and different fears from one another. And sometimes we feel like we're in a struggle or conflict within ourselves, as though there's one part of us that wants to do one thing or go in one direction, and then there's another part or aspect of ourself that's pulling in the opposite direction, and so we just remain kind of stuck. We're not really progressing or evolving. So let's go into a little more detail about this. Let's explore our fears and our desires and those aspects of ourself that are being directed or influenced by those fears and desires. So there's fears, there's desires. And then down here at the bottom, we'll put a few different aspects of who we could say we are, what type of being we experience as humans. So first there's the animal aspect of ourself. So let's use this color. And here's our animal self. Then we have our social self. And then our spiritual self or soul. So these are these different aspects of ourself. And each one has its own set of fears and desires. So for your animal part of yourself, well, that aspect of you, who you are, really is concerned with survival. So with physical reality and avoiding dangers that are present that could threaten physical survival, and also acquiring or obtaining physical sustenance. So animals have to get food, right? And water, so whatever their physical body needs in order to maintain itself, well, that will be part of the desires of that animal. So for this animal, the desires could be food, it could be sex, it could be shelter. So all those things that are necessary for physical survival. Now, we're human beings that are social beings, so we have to interact with other people. We have relationships, and with those relationships, we tend to be concerned about receiving some type of nurturance and receiving some acceptance or approval in those relationships. We're also concerned with our social status. So in terms of social status, we're often comparing ourselves to others and seeing where we fall in that social totem pole, so to speak. If we're a person who's in the in-group or out-group, if we're respected, or if we're shunned. So that's all part of the social aspects. So we desire social approval. So we want some type of positive social feedback. We want to have status in society. So we want people to look up to us and not look down upon us. So that's all part of our social desires. Now we're coming over to the soul. Now the soul is not really so constricted or constrained by these particular desires. It's not opposed to them, but it may desire something more, something beyond that. Our soul desires experience. It desires adventure. It desires expression and what we might call actualization. In humanistic psychology, the phrase self-actualization is somewhat popular, and that, in a sense, refers mainly to the spiritual aspect of who we are, this part that desires greater self-expression, personal evolution, and expansion. So the desires of our soul relate a lot to that, to this personal expansion, to not being constricted in who we are, to pursuing new challenges, new adventures, new things to include in our personal path, in our journey of adventure. So we've gone through the desires here, and now we're ready to reflect somewhat on the fears, since fears can be present with these different aspects or layers of our being. So first we'll look at the animal self. What is its fear? Well, it's afraid of death. It's afraid of injury and pain. So the animal aspect of self will take action to avoid death or injury or physical pain, which means it's going to perhaps constrict itself. It won't go in a place where it thinks or feels there may be some danger present, so it will limit its activity to avoid those things that it fears. Next, we'll look at the social aspect of self, and what are the fears that tend to be predominant with that layer of our being. Well, the social aspect tends to be afraid of being rejected, rejection, abandonment, it's afraid of guilt or shame. It doesn't want to be shamed or embarrassed. So overall, it's concerned or afraid of negative feedback in that social context, of being somehow disapproved of or ostracized or separated from connection to others. So in that sense, it's about separation. So there we have the major fears for our social self. Now we come to the soul self. Well, the soul self actually knows itself as a part of a spiritual source that's whole and complete and filled with unlimited potential. So it knows itself as limitless and eternal, and based on that self-awareness, It's not so concerned with these animal level issues. So the soul itself can't die. It's not limited to any feeling of pain. It doesn't need physical food or sex or shelter. It's just pure awareness. The soul is also not really that concerned about these social aspects because the soul knows who it truly is, its greater or its essential identity. So it doesn't need other people, other human beings, to give it approval, to give it status. It recognizes that it's just as valuable or important as all the other souls that are part of creation. So it's not seeking to make itself appear greater than, or not worried that other people will think it's less than other souls. Your soul is not afraid that the creator or the spiritual source is about to reject it or abandon it. So your soul is really not so caught up in fear. Your soul is really very much filled with desire, with this essential drive for expansion, for gaining more experience, for pursuing new challenges and adventures. So the soul doesn't like to be limited or constricted. It's what people often call free-spirited. It seeks to just explore life, to try things out. So it's not really limiting itself in the ways that the animal part of self or the social aspect of self would often be inclined to. So if we're seeking to expand who we are, if we're seeking to express more of our potential as a human being, we would naturally wish to identify more with this soul aspect of ourself rather than just the social or just the animal aspects of ourself. If we're too focused on those other aspects, on the survival, on acquiring food and sex and shelter, or getting other people to say or show that they like or appreciate us, then we'll be constricted. Our energy will be diverted or distracted by that, and we won't be able to use all of our energy, all of our spiritual potential to go on this adventure of life and experience everything that's possible, everything that our soul might actually desire for us. So as we look at or reflect upon this chart, I would invite you to recognize where your fears come from, what aspect of yourself naturally relates to and creates those types of fears, and seeing how those fears would seem completely rational and sensible to that aspect of your being, but yet at the same time to know yourself now as more than just that aspect of self, to appreciate all the different layers and levels of who you are, and to embody the soul more, to resonate more with that layer of yourself so that you have more power and potential, that you live more from desires, experience, adventure, expansion, actualization, that dominates your life much more so than fear of death or pain, fear of rejection, of abandonment or shame. So this reprogramming of yourself can help you live a more fulfilling life, a less fearful life, a life where you're able to pursue more adventure, where you're not as inhibited, you're not as restricted in what you may choose to do or explore. I hope that this presentation has provided some inspiration for each of you. For those that are interested in your personal growth, your spiritual development, in becoming more whole and complete in your human experience, you're welcome to watch other video presentations I've done. And I invite you to visit my website, which is phinsights.com. That's phinsights.com. For now, I want to wish each of you a wonderful day. Namaste.